Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a bit different. We're looking way past the world-famous, glossy image of a beloved East African nation to explore the really fascinating, hidden layers underneath. We're basically deconstructing Tanzania. We're going to look at exactly how a country's global image gets built, and more importantly, what realities are left completely off camera.
Okay, let's dive right into this. When you hear the word Tanzania, your mind probably jumps straight to, majestic lions roaming the savannah, or hot air balloons drifting over those endless plains. But there is a pretty jarring contrast between these tourist fantasies and the country's actual, complex, internal realities. As you'll see today, the story of modern Tanzania reveals this incredibly complex web of narrative control, political survival, and everyday environmental resilience. So here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll start with the postcard facade, move into engineering a nation, then examine the state of fear. After that, we'll hit the climate frontline, and finally wrap up with reclaiming the narrative.
Part 1. The postcard facade, Serengeti, safaris, and stability.
The global image of Tanzania is, frankly, incredibly alluring. We picture a peaceful democracy, the massive 30,000 square kilometer Serengeti ecosystem, and a booming diaspora tourism industry. I mean, IMAX documentaries have shown us all those breathtaking great wildebeest migrations, right? But step away from the luxury safari lodges for a minute, and there is a hidden reality. We're talking about veiled socio-political struggles, historically engineered identities, and severe climate crises that are literally threatening the survival of indigenous tribes.
Now, the draw of Tanzania is powerful, especially for the African diaspora. Visitors constantly report experiencing this profound connection that absolutely shatters the negative narratives they were taught in the West. Many have noted they were actually told Africa was a place they shouldn't visit. But while that beautiful connection is very real, the nation's unified facade, well, that didn't happen by accident. It was actually carefully designed.
Part 2. Engineering a nation, cinema, control, and unity.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer speed of it all. How do you take 120 distinct ethnic groups and mold them into a single, unified state? Notice how rapidly this consolidation happened. We kick off in 1961 with Tanganyika's independence. Just 3 years later, in 1964, Tanganyika and Zanzibar unite to form modern Tanzania. And then boom, the 1967 Arusha Declaration. This was a highly calculated, rapid consolidation of power that set the stage for total state control over the national identity. The ideological engine driving all of this was called Ujamaa. Spearheaded by President Julius Nyerere, Ujamaa basically translates to familyhood. It combined African socialism with this idea of strict self-reliance. But practically speaking, it meant the aggressive, forced homogenization of all those ethnic groups. The government kicked off a villagization program to manufacture one single national identity. They moved citizens into collective, planned villages, and sometimes they used brute force when people resisted leaving their ancestral lands.
And the cultural enforcement of this was just as absolute. The state knew exactly how powerful film could be, so they banned ethnic unions to wipe out tribalism completely. They didn't just give grants to filmmakers, they made them state-employed civil servants. They would literally drive mobile cinema vans deep into rural areas to project what scholars call cheerleading cinema. These were films that solely praised the government without offering any space for critical thought. All social commentary was strictly suppressed. It was a brilliant, if highly authoritarian apparatus to socialize the population. And this historical framework of absolute narrative control, it has modern and sometimes chilling manifestations.
Part 3. The state of fear. The high price of dissent.
200. Just let that number sink in for a second. According to extensive recent investigations documented by Amnesty International and BBC Africa Eye, there have been 200 recent cases of enforced disappearances in Tanzania. And the targets? They are activists, artists, and opposition politicians who have dared to speak out against the current administration.
The accounts from survivors are honestly harrowing. They detail severe physical trauma and psychological warfare. One survivor noted that state operatives will, quote, hurt a few so that many will be scared. According to human rights advocates, the clear intention here is to paralyze the population with fear. Now, to be objective here, the government's official stance, often put out through police statements, claims that these disappearances are just the result of personal disputes, deaths, or even witch doctors. But independent investigators point to a very different state-driven methodology.
So the crucial point here is the chilling, documented pattern that emerges from these abductions. First, vocal critics are targeted. Second, they are abducted by unidentifiable, often heavily armed men.
Third, official custody is completely denied. Victims are sometimes forced to sign fake bail forms just to make it look like they walked out freely, which essentially wipes the state's fingerprints off the arrest. Finally, survivors report being brutally interrogated, tortured, and then just abandoned in remote areas. In fact, operatives like Zonal Criminal Officer Faustin Mafuele have been repeatedly named by survivors in these investigations as leading these task forces. But political survival isn't the only battle happening behind the postcard.
Part 4. The Environmental Front Line. A war for land and survival. And this brilliantly illustrates our next point. Indigenous populations in Tanzania are facing an absolute existential crisis. The country's oldest cultures are being squeezed from all sides. Take the Maasai, for instance. Their wealth and culture are entirely tied to their cattle, which are dying by the thousands due to multi-year droughts. On top of that, they're being forcibly evicted from their ancestral lands, sometimes literally having their homes burned down, just to make way for lucrative hunting safaris leased to foreign entities like the UAE. Meanwhile, the Hadza, which is a 40,000-year-old hunter-gatherer tribe, have lost two-thirds of their ancient forest territory. Desperate farmers, fleeing the drought themselves, are chopping down the Hadza's forest to plant crops. It's this tragic chain reaction of climate displacement.
So where exactly do those desperate farmers go when the rural earth scorches? Well, it triggers a devastating cascade. 150,000 farmers arrive in Dar es Salaam every single year. Because they're poor, they have no choice but to settle in illegal, high-risk shanty towns like Sana, which are built right in flood valleys. And then the extreme climate strikes again. Because of shifting weather patterns, the city recently got slammed with a record-breaking 156 millimeters of rainfall in a single day. The shanty towns flooded catastrophically, trapping these climate refugees in an endless cycle of poverty, malaria, and completely destroyed homes. But despite these massive systemic odds, both political and environmental, ordinary Tanzanians are absolutely not giving up.
Part 5. Reclaiming the Narrative, Grassroots Resilience.
Let's move on and see how this builds into some incredible local hope. People are literally taking matters into their own hands. The Hadza have actually partnered with NGOs to secure a legally protected 20-hectare primary forest sanctuary to keep agricultural encroachment out. Over at the World Vegetable Center, agronomists are teaching struggling farmers to abandon water-heavy corn and cultivate indigenous, drought-resistant amaranth instead, which incredibly matures in just 21 days. And local leaders, they are leveraging their influence to make a massive, tangible impact.
This grassroots movement is beautifully captured by Assistant Bishop Frederick Shu. He actually requires every single child in his diocese to plant and care for 10 trees between their communion and confirmation. Under his guidance, they have overseen the planting of over 1 million trees. He insists, quote, "What we want is a generational change, a tree planting generation." It's just a super powerful testament to local leaders instilling practical survival tactics to literally hold the very soil of their nation together.
So from the state-controlled mobile cinemas of the 1960s to the terrifying silencing of modern critics, all the way to resilient farmers planting amaranth and trees in the scorched earth, Tanzania is a country actively fighting over its own narrative. So I want to leave you with this question to think about. Who ultimately gets to write a nation's story? Is it the state that curates the glossy postcard image, or the people who bravely survive the reality? Thank you so much for joining me to deconstruct this fascinating topic today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.